Welcome to the Data Leadership Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony J. Algeman. Data is everywhere in our businesses, and it takes leadership to make the most of it. We bring you the people, stories, and lessons to help you become a data leader. Today, I'm joined by Tom Redman. Also known as the Data Doc, Tom is the president of Data Quality Solutions. He's among the few able to combine a visionary's view of data landscape with deep expertise in data quality and data science. He's a prolific speaker and writer of several books and countless articles. His latest book, The Real Work of Data Science, was published in 2019. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
So you have, a long history in the data quality, data management space, and have been, one of my role models for a long time. And we've gotten to know each other through the years at attending similar events, and we'll talk about some of that today. But the as many reasons as I wanted to have you on the show, I kind of would just like to start with this, is that we had a conversation shortly after my book came out last year. And you had read it, and it was exciting, and we talked a lot about different aspects of it and noodled it, and it was really cool for me to be able to have that conversation with you. But you did have one point of criticism that got me thinking, and I immediately was like, I kind of agree with your criticism, and that is that in our data leadership framework, in the book that I wrote, I really kind of glossed over, I think is a fair way of saying it, the role of data creation in data quality. And to me, it's implied and it's clear, but it's not well stated. It's certainly not stated enough and to the level of emphasis that it needs to be in the context of the book, especially for somebody who doesn't come in. And I think for me, it was a learning opportunity to say, you know what, that was one area that I really should have spent more time on building up the fundamentals. So can you talk about, your perspective on that and help those that are out there watching or listening to this, help them understand what is it that they should really know about that piece of criticism? Because I'd like to give them that opportunity now if they hadn't gotten it when reading the book themselves.
Yep. Okay. Well. First of all, thank you for the kind words, Anthony. And to begin, let's put data quality in its full context. If you go, just take before the crisis, and I've done a little bit of work to try to get our arms around how good is the data actually. And I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago that finally assembled enough data from things that we could quote, and so put together an article that was titled, only 3% of companies' data meets basic quality standards. And so we published this little article at hbr.org. And it really set on, for the first time in my view, in real foundation that most of the data is not up to shape. It is not up to standards. And so we look at things, now today, as we fight the pandemic, it's all the misinformation that's running around and the impact is causing, but it's not, just how many people have died, but it's when is my state's website for unemployment going to actually work? And when are they going to have toilet paper in the bathroom and so forth? We have to really set ourselves in this grounding that too much of the data is bad. Right. And the impact is simply enormous. Some of it is just pretty basic. The operations get fouled up, the wrong size sweater is sent to the wrong address, that kind of thing. Bad decisions are made, and so all that trite stuff. You net that out, right? It is an incredible amount of money. IBM published a statistic that it came to $3 trillion a year. The people, may spend 20 or more % of their time every day cleaning up data so they can do their job as either a salesman or maybe they search for oil or whatever it does. And then the hottest thing around, today is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and right, you put bad data into an algorithm and you get a bad algorithm, pure and simple. And so look, everything we want to do in the data space runs through quality, and the quality is bad. Mm-hmm. Now, Now, the bottom line is there's two ways to attack the issue. And one way is to deal with bad data as you try to use it and just sort of, look, clean up the data, right? Figure out this is the wrong address. What's the right address? We want to create an algorithm, right? Run the data through some machine learning thing to help us identify errors, try to fix the errors, kind of thing. And there is a whole cottage industry of tools and things that we in the data management space have tried to use. And the second way to do it is quit making so many errors in the first place. Right. And I hope it sounds just as obvious as I made it out to be. Right. It is really hard to find and correct errors. It costs a lot of money. It is contributing to that $3 trillion problem that I cited today. And as opposed to creating the data correctly, which requires a different mindset, what frankly is way, way easier. And it works right now. And by the way, it works really, really well. People need a little bit of measurement. They need to understand what's most important. But then time and time again, right, so people can go out and find, here's the root cause of that problem. Let's make it go away forever. Right. And so this is what I mean by focusing on the points of data creation. And just, one thing further, and this is almost everybody inside a modern organization today is a data creator. Mm-hmm. And so almost everybody gets to join in the fun.
Yeah. And so one of the challenges that I have often encountered, and I'm sure you have a perspective on with data creation, is that a lot of times the person who's doing that data entry isn't the person who's going to benefit most directly from the data quality in which they've created the data. And so how do you help organizations reconcile that?
Well, so that's a good question, Anthony. But look, here's what I find. There's two important roles in data quality. One is the data creator, and the other is the data customer. Mm-hmm. And so the customer is the person or the organization, or in some cases, it's an algorithm, right? So somebody's responsible for the algorithm, hopefully, that is going to use the data. And so, people come in and look, maybe they're creating data incorrectly, but nobody has ever told them that there's a customer and that the customer needs the data to do whatever it is. I tell a little story about a woman in sales who gets her leads from marketing. And if the contact information isn't right, then she has to spend a couple of hours every day, finding the right contact information. So it's not like anybody in marketing said, oh, we're going to send over bad details, right? Because we know that that's going to screw our colleague up over in sales and they'll have to do a lot of work. Mm-hmm. So most creators have never been advised of who the customer is or what the customer requires. And so I find almost always, now not always, there's been one or two exceptions over the course of my career, which, now is a lot longer than I care to admit. Well, this didn't happen. But when customers reach out to creators and say, hey, I use the stuff you create. Here's what I use it for. Mm-hmm. Here's why it's important. Can we work together so that you'll understand what I need and to fix your process? Right. And time again, I find that, the creators step up. Okay. And it's most of them simply, they don't want to foul up somebody in another part of their organization. Mm-hmm. Right. Now, it doesn't always work, and not all data comes from inside the organization. So, so there's some little twists and turns on this. But the bottom line is there's these very, very two important roles, creator and customer. And neither one of them is technically hard, but they do require people to think and act differently. And I find that, when people learn about these rules and they step into them, uh, quality almost always improves really, really quickly.
Right. So communication, like so many things, so many breakdowns in our organization have a communication component both to the cause of them and to the solution behind them,
Yeah.
and resolving them. And
Yeah,
so,
that's a really good point, right? Sometimes I say, well, nobody ever comes into work and says, I'm going to do something today because I know it's going to foul out Loretta 3 departments away in 6 months, right?
right.
So, I mean, that just doesn't happen, and and so but people are fouling up Loretta, and so the only conclusion you can reach is they don't know what Loretta needs, right?
Right.
And this failure to communicate. I mean, it sounds so simple, and yet it requires, these roles are simple, but they require a great deal of thought, and they require a change in the way people act and they think about their job.
Yeah, well, and I think that we're seeing certainly at and higher levels of an organization, but I imagine it's true kind of throughout organizations, is that there's a greater awareness that data is important. That the implications of that may not always be clear, but people throughout an organization realizes, hey, data is an important piece of our future success, and even though I don't know all the ins and outs of it, they become a more receptive audience, realizing that, oh, I can see why the data that I'm creating actually does get used by somebody and actually does matter to future business. And so I think by helping them understand how, we'll have more receptive audiences than maybe in the past. I think about a client that I once had, that was in the insurance space, and a lot of the data was being entered by sales folks, like insurance brokers, and they didn't have time for any data entry or what have you because they were too busy doing sales and other stuff like that. But I wonder if today, because this is probably 10, 15 years ago now, I wonder if today maybe they realize, hey, I've been doing a lot more work from reports and other pieces of information, and I've seen firsthand some of the degradation of information from my own work in the past. I may be now more receptive than I used to be to doing a little bit more work to making sure that data gets entered in the first place. Is that something that you've seen, or is that trend not yet clear?
Well, I haven't seen the trend. I mean, frankly, look, I think a lot of people say, well, look, I'm too busy, to do this job, and when it appears to just be a bureaucratic, waste of time, you can't blame them, and that's why connecting the dots is, well, when you don't do this, here's what happens,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it is that explanation that I find is the winner. And frankly, it's worked for me. I don't know. I mean, when I say it's worked, I mean it's just basic blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
So I really haven't noticed that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so maybe it's hypothetical, but regardless, I mean, I think the clear guidance though is that it's it is a wake up call to people that are entering data. Hey, this stuff is important, and you should take that in consideration in the work you're doing to get information into whatever systems you're working with. So I
But so,
want to,
by the way, it's not just people entering data. So we gather a lot of data with machines,
yeah, yeah,
right? And so who's responsible for the machine? Right? Who's
sure,
responsible for calibrating the device, right? I mean, the point of data creation, we tend to think of it as, somebody who's a data entry folk, and it's this low level job, but data creation is going on at all levels, right? And it's going on. So you think about a decision and the direction we're going to go, a decision about what we're going to count as a COVID-19 incident and so forth. Those happen higher up, but that is creating data in the same sense, right? And
hmm
and so this is not a message we want to necessarily push down. This is a message we want to push up, and we want to push the message out.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to take this notion of a wake up call, and I want to talk a little bit about you. You recently published an article at Dataversity in collaboration with John Ladley and some other folks, talking about how we've failed collectively with data management, and right now, should serve as a wake up call to us. So how did that article come about? How'd you arrive at that conclusion? And Because there's so many people, like some of the people that are listening to this are data management folks, but many people are not. What should people who aren't data management professionals do in response to this wake up call and in this fact that we seemingly have failed with data management?
Yeah, so let me answer that in two parts. I mean, I myself and a few others have been saying for, I don't know, 10 years that our number one job in data management is to train up, right? It is to train up so that people all the way into the most senior reaches of management and to boards understand the importance of data, and they understand how data in a very detailed, intimate way is connected to business success, right? And we have not done that. And that is what we, said the data management has failed at. It has not done the training up job. And by the way, I mean, it's also failed, right? I mean, it is ridiculous that 3% of companies' data meets basic standards, right? So we've not done our job. I mean, to me, like the way you start to do things better is you admit the truth. And the truth, which we did not cause coronavirus, right? Data management did not cause coronavirus. But data management has helped contribute to the misinformation or the lack of data management has contributed to the misinformation and the human suffering that goes along with that. And I think that if we're serious professionals, and it doesn't apply to data management, but anything is recognize we weren't up to it when it mattered most, right? And pure and simple, that's what motivated John and I. And if we're writing it, it occurs to us, well, okay, I mean, it doesn't do any good to simply complain. It says, well, what do we need to do differently, right? And we dissected it, and the prescriptions in that article are stunningly simple. And frankly, to your point about, well, do they apply just to people in data management or elsewhere? They apply to everyone. Let me just pick out the one that I think is most relevant to non-data people, and that is this business of becoming a provocateur. And so, if you think about the organization's momentum on data quality is sort of, I got my hand going across the top of my head. Yeah. Sort of, okay, we got to get better at cleaning up stuff. We got to get better at cleaning up stuff. No, we got to not make mistakes to begin with, right? That's not a data management concept. That is a business concept. And so, the real spirit of being a provocateur is you're changing the momentum from doing this to doing that, right? And anybody can do that. Any person on their team, any manager can do that at any level. That is the spirit of being a provocateur. And in fact, I mean, the people I recognize as provocateurs, far more of them have been outside the data community than inside the data community. They've been concerned. So, well, we're not getting the right data from these suppliers, or we're not managing risk correctly. We're not managing the oil wells properly. Note the subtle difference between we're not managing the oil wells properly and we're not managing the data about the oil wells properly. Right? The first one is we need data to do something of significance to the business, and that's why the opportunity for provocateurs is so great. If something in your business is not working well, right, there may be a great opportunity that the data may be at the root of that, and you can make it better.
Tom, is there a correlation or any pattern you've seen between deficiencies, we'll say, in data management and data quality more broadly, and things like technical debt? Like how closely tied is the data problem to the technology problem or the way we're running technology in our organizations, or is it not?
Well, so look, I suspect that there's a lot of answers, a lot to that. But one thing I find that almost everybody does is they confuse the management of data and the management of tech. And the worst thing you can do is you can subordinate the data. You can subordinate the data to the tech. And but the fact of the matter is data is just a different kind of thing than tech. And and if you confuse the two, then you end up not managing either one of them very well. And so the first thing I tell people is, look, you got to separate the management of data from the management of the tech. And so if we got time for a little story, I mean, just not too long ago, if you wanted to watch a movie, you had to go to the theater, right? And then we got TV in houses, and you could watch the movie in the house, and then things get better and better on video cassettes. You could watch it anytime you wanted, and now you can watch a movie practically anywhere, practically anytime, on practically any device, right? But a bad movie is still a bad movie, right?
That's right.
And by and large, making movies is different than making the technology that by which you view them, right? And so when you run into problems, and a lot of things present themselves as systems problems, like these systems don't talk, but the really problems with the underlying data.
Yeah.
And if somehow you misdiagnose that and subordinate that problem as a computer problem, then you're going to have a lot of problems. And so this is an area, by the way, where companies and individuals, they make this mistake over and over again. I tell this story, Anthony, and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, that's right," and but nobody thinks of that story on their own, right? Nobody comes to the conclusion, hey, we can't put. We also had the discussion. You cannot put your CDO in tech, right? They're different kinds of assets.
Yeah, well, and I love this analogy, and the audience of this podcast knows I'm a bit of a student of analogies, and oftentimes we'll go charging forward with a half-baked analogy, and it just doesn't work. Your analogy here, though, was fantastic, and what I like about it so much, and the notion, it's a very visceral notion of a bad movie is still a bad movie. And then I also think about how technology is capable of ruining my movie as well. Like when I'm trying to watch a movie on my phone when I'm commuting back on a train from downtown Chicago, I'd be commuting back home trying to watch this movie. I can't get a signal. My movie's all stuttery. It becomes a terrible experience, right? And so there's an analogy there too. If the technology can't support, if it can't just get out of the way of the data sometimes and let it and support it to do what it needs to do, then the data is going to be compromised in totally other, different ways, but it's still going to ruin that experience for somebody because the experience has to bring together. The data is the most important thing. That movie's the most important thing. But if the technology gets in the way, if your medium gets in the way, then you're going to have problems too. If you can't hear the sound, that's going to ruin your movie just as much as anything else. So
right. Look, I think this is a really good point. I mean, so I talk about this a lot. People go, "Well, Tom, you don't like tech," and that's wrong. I mean, I love a lot of tech, but they need. And you said it this way: the two have to come together, right? And that probably means there's sort of like a co-equal investment. And there's way too much time and effort spent on the tech and way too little on the data for that to be working out. Yeah. By the way, interestingly, practically everyone, if you ask the question, well, which would you rather have? Would you rather have a little bit of proprietary data, or would you like to have the latest and greatest algorithm? Right, those are your two choices. Everybody says, "I'll take the data," because the algorithm's it may not be a commodity yet, but it's going to be a commodity. Mm-hmm. And most of the tech is a commodity, and the data is what's unique, right? And it's kind of surprising. You create the value. You need the tech, but you create the value through the data.
That's a very good point as well, because it is like we have the cloud now. We have almost infinite computing power at our fingertips,
We do, yes.
and we are able to squander that just as much as we've been able to squander technology for a long time. And so I think there's a lot
Right.
of truth in your comments there. I would like
So,
to,
by the way,
yeah.
but let me build on it, in one regard, because it gets back to a question you asked a minute ago.
Mhm.
So there's a phrase, data as an asset,
Yes.
right? Running around, and it's the kind of thing that a lot of data people would say, well, I sent it to my boss, why did he get it, right? Kind of things, right? And what there's a couple of problems with it. And by the way, I wrote a book on what it meant for data to be an asset, right? So I may have contributed to this problem. But the first problem is that it is observably not true that all data is an asset. Most of it is never used by anyone for anything,
Right.
right? It's hard to classify something you don't use as an asset, right? And then so much of it is bad, right? It is hard to
Yes.
classify bad data as an asset, right? And so we make this comment, so, well, data is an asset. And people look at that and they go, well, that can't possibly be true, right? Um, and then it's with senior people, it's okay, fine, it's an asset. What's in it for me? What specific business problems do I use it to solve? How do I create opportunity from it? Right? How am I going to make it just so I can trust it when I make a decision? And and we've not spent enough time giving specific, direct answers to that question, which comes up every single time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Bad data is not an asset. I think that one might be going in the title of this episode. Um, the so but it so it's this reminds me actually, and some of the frustration. Like we know in the data management space we have not yet achieved what our potential is, and we're struggling with that. And it's we know that the problem is there, and you and I talked maybe about a year ago at a conference, and you expressed to me some frustration that stuck with me ever since. That we as a data management community keep talking about this. We keep talking about exactly what we've been talking about on this episode so far. And
Right.
it's been the same thing for years. It's getting bigger. It's evolving a little bit here or there, but it's the same stuff we've been talking about. And in these data management communities, it's the same story, and it feels like we're not moving it forward. It's unproductive. What are we missing? Like how do we break out of that and do it right finally? What does that look like?
Yeah. So look, that is a really good question, and it's not just the data management community, right? I mean, it's anybody who touches data, and I've spent hours thinking about that. I think first of all, it's everybody's different, and there's a combination of reasons for any one individual, and never mind that over the tens of thousands of people with data management in their title and the millions who touch data. But first of all, I mean, in some cases, a lot of people are introverts, right? So people who go into the data space are introverts. I remember one person one time telling me that they wanted to become a data modeler because they wanted to avoid politics, right? I did what you did. I laughed.
Yeah.
Oh, you poor, whatever, right? Kind of thing. And by the way, I mean, on one hand, I sort of get that. I mean, I was an introvert, right? And so you kind of have to learn to get out there and talk to people. And then the second thing is I think a lot of people in data, I mean, they really are enamored of the technology, right?
Yeah.
And they'd rather tell you about the blockchain thing or stuff moving stuff to the cloud than they would really engaging on what is going on in this department, why so much bad data is being created. um, and a third factor, and this one really bothers me, is I think there may be some elements of fear,
Hmm.
right? I think some people are just afraid of getting out there and and exposing themselves. And maybe people will find out they don't know what they're talking about, or whatever it may be. And that's I'm really disheartened by that, right? I mean, because the opportunity is so great, and now is not the time to be paralyzed by fear. And so I don't know. I don't have a good answer, Anthony. I suspect it is a combination of things for different individuals.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that there's a reason that we've been struggling with this for a long time, and that the answer isn't going to be a simple one. And I've often told that joke too at conferences and stuff. It's like, sorry, data is all about people and changing behaviors and all of this stuff that we were trying to avoid when we got into the data space in the first place. Like, we were trying to go write queries because we like talking to the machines, and like we like the problem solving and the analytics side of it. But if we focus all of our energy in that domain, the thing that we really have to do, which comes back to connecting it to business, connecting it to how people are really using it, how business gets better with the outcomes of this, until we do that, then all of this potential energy, these potential assets that we have, we can get them better and make them as useful as possible. But until they're actually used, it's just potential. It's just, stuff we've churned in the machine that we hope someday somebody will pick up and make use of.
Right. I mean, a potential asset is the same as a non-asset in terms of what it actually delivers.
That's right.
I want to build on one thing you were saying, though, and that is it is just not that hard, right? I one time wrote a little article that was data management is not a job you do in your office, right, or in your cube or whatever. You do it in other people's cubes, and you do it in meeting rooms, and you can do it over lunch, right? I mean, you can do it over a beer after work, kind of thing. It is just not that hard to engage, and people are having trouble doing it. They ought to think about their long suit. Well, how do I like to engage? Am I doing it in formal meetings? Do I do it one-on-one? Do I like to run into people in the cafeteria? Right? I mean, there's it. If you think through what you're good at, and let's face it, people in data management are smart and they care, right? They and we can solve this problem and get out and do it. And it doesn't mean every engagement's going to go well, but a lot of them are really, really do. A lot of people want to hear from their data colleagues.
I want to pull on a thread because what you just said, I think, is so right. Like, a lot of the success of data management comes from the soft side, from that interpersonal connection. Right now, when so many of us are working remotely and there is no other office to go to or place to grab coffee in a lot of cases, and we're starting, maybe it's starting to thaw a little bit, but what advice do you have when we're in a Zoom based world, when it's all video chats and telephone calls and emails? What can regular data management folks do to be as effective as possible, given some of the constraints of right now?
Well, so look, I mean, I think if you're an introvert, the Zoom is kind of tailor made for you, isn't it? Right? You don't have to plan it that well. You don't have to worry about the environment and the lighting as much, and so forth. I don't think this is a very good answer, but whatever the conditions are, right? I mean, there's people that says, okay, well, I work in London, and the people I need to talk to are in the Netherlands, or right, or I work in this time zone, and I work in, need to talk to people at other time zones. There's always a reason not to connect, right? There's a reason not to connect now, and that, people are doing it face to face. But the bottom line is, it was hard to do it face to face before, right? And you had to take advantage of Zoom and in some cases email before. I guess what I would say is you may not use the pandemic as an excuse not to do it, right? So anybody who said, yep, Tom, got it, drank the Kool-Aid, once we're all back in the office, I'll reach out, then no. Do it today, right? Do it today. Today, make a list. If you're in data management, make a list of your 3 most important customers And by the end of the day, either call them on the phone or send them an email and say, I want to have a chat, right? Screw up your courage and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's, it's so tempting to use this time as an excuse to not move things forward in this capacity and in every capacity, you know. And if you found yourself on the couch and not working out that day, or you've not, like, everything
Yes.
could be an excuse right now. And so it's important to push through that in a number of fronts.
Right.
While we still have a little bit of time, I would like to talk to you about, so at your business in data quality solutions, you do a lot of work with very senior executives, and they see data from their vantage point in ways that potentially others in the organization don't. And that may be for better or worse. What tends to hold these organizations back, even when the senior leadership is drinking that Kool-Aid, and that senior leadership for support, or senior leadership support for data management and transformations, is there, but they're still struggling with some of the stuff that we're talking about? How do you resolve that?
Well, so look, I think that a lot of our problems are built into the word support, right? Support is a sort of weak active voice verb, right? So what we're really looking for is commitment. And we want people, senior leaders who say, we're going to transform something, we're going to do this. They have assignments the same way that everybody else has an assignment. So, okay. And so maybe, look, you're going to go to a town hall, and at that town hall, you're going to call out some good work that Peggy and Peter and Tim, right, buried in the bowels of the organization, did to fix them. Right. And then, so the next time there's a newsletter, you're going to talk about what data means to you personally. Right. And so senior leadership, yes, I support it. That's not what we're seeking. We're looking to establish senior leaders who have real skin in the game, who have real personal things to gain, personal benefits, and are willing to then take on assignments, right? And again, I mean, I'm not just trying to pick on the word support versus commitment. Mm-hmm. I mean, one is weak and the other is very, very powerful. Look, I think that, when somebody says, well, so-and-so supports it, that's code for others in the organization that forget about it. You're not going to get it done. Right. Yeah. And it underscores it, Anthony, all the senior leaders I've ever met, so they are really smart, right? They are really smart, and they want a simple, direct answer to this question: mm-hmm. What's in it for this business? Okay, and so, well, data is an asset. So, okay, fine. What is in it for this business? I am dealing with this problem, and this problem. How will data help on any of those? And by the way, I mean, good data almost always helps everything in decision making, but we can't be on this sort of general point. We have to be very specific, and senior managers are very supportive of good, strong answers to solving business problems. Mm-hmm. Okay, they commit to those things. They put in their personal time. They get good people on them, and so forth.
Yeah, well, it makes so much sense, because think about, and for anybody who's out there, think about if you had a big flashy kickoff to an initiative around data, which will tend to spike the interest early on, realizing though, or maybe not realizing in that moment, that the data journey is a long one. It is not a particularly exciting one much of the time. We think it's great, but we're weird. Most organizations are going to say, this is a slog, and it rightfully is. What you need is that executive who's there 6 months from that kickoff, or a year from that kickoff, and is still committed. So I think that though it comes, we started as a semantic, notion, I think it's an incredibly important point for anybody out there to realize, hey, it is about that lasting commitment and that benefit that incentivize and creates momentum in your data efforts, because it's that will feed, it will create something that can grow, because you don't have enough resources to keep dumping into a data management organization, data governance organization that's not producing results. No organization has that luxury for any lengthy amount of time.
Yeah, that's correct. Let me build on that in one way. One thing I have found, and it has been the best discovery of my career, Anthony. Okay, and when you do data management right, it is fun, right? So we started out talking about somebody who's entering data, right? And instead of just entering their data, now their job becomes, hey, you have to meet these customer needs. Right, you have to figure out what's going on, the root cause of these things. You have to make the root causes of those things go away. Okay, it is a far more exciting job than simply entering data or dealing with it. So right, it is. People love finding and eliminating root causes of error. It is something we have going for us, right? And yes, you need senior leadership, but you also get that pegged with people enjoying it, right? It comes together and can be really powerful.
Yeah, I think that is great words of wisdom, and people should realize that we're not doing this because we're told to, or that it's a necessity. It is those things, but there's so much that can be built in terms of pride, in terms of happiness in your career, and in terms of impact to your business. And if we keep orienting back to that, it's important to get the blocking and tackling and the domain aspects correct. But if we can find ourselves impacting the business in a meaningful way, that's what gets us going every single time. That's why we're in this business. And once you see that spark, it changes you forever, because then you can put it all together as somebody who uses data to improve your organization. And that's, it's incredibly powerful, whether you're a data management professional, a CEO, somewhere in between, a technology worker. Every one of us, data impacts what we do, and if we can make the most of it, we're going to do that better, and we're going to have a more rewarding existence.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, it's what keeps me coming in, right? There is real power and real human fulfillment in this stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I love this area because there's so much that we're able to do, and so many challenges. That's part of the reason why it's such a rewarding career. Well, Tom, we are absolutely out of time now. I feel like we just scratched the surface, so hopefully we'll be able to have you back on a future episode, very soon. But thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Tom. And thank you for watching or listening today. You'll find links and more information about today's topic in the show notes. Please remember to subscribe to our show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Visit Algman.com to learn more about Algman Data Leadership and the many ways we can help you become a data leader. Stay safe during these unusual times and go make an impact.